Hey everybody, it's Mrs. Peachy for Summer School Biology, and today we are going to go through the process of cellular respiration. If you remember, just recently we talked about photosynthesis and how autotrophs, specifically photoautotrophs, the ones that use sunlight, can take the energy from the sun along with carbon dioxide and water and construct molecules of sugar, and those sugar molecules are used for food then. Now, those are long-term storage molecules that allow the plants to have sugar available anytime it needs it and not have to manufacture it all the time. So now we're going to see how does the plant or an animal take that sugar that has been either made or consumed and break it down into usable short-term energy molecules. Most importantly, we're looking at ATP. ATP is the leading energy carrier molecule in your body. ATP, adenosine triphosphate. First of all, let's look at an organelle in the cell that you guys should know about already, but we're going to become more familiar with, and that is the mitochondria. And as you can see here, it is kind of a bean-shaped organelle, and it has two membranes. It has an outer membrane, and then it has kind of this winding inner membrane that houses what we call the matrix of the mitochondria. The matrix. Okay, and we will talk about kind of what takes place where in the process of respiration, because we're going to be using a lot of parts in the mitochondria as well as outside of it. I want you to also note that the mitochondria has its own DNA and its own ribosomes, and so it does some of its own protein synthesis. It's pretty ancient as far as organelles goes. It's been around a lot longer than our cells as a whole, this type of structure. Okay, let's revisit what photosynthesis was, and respiration is exactly the opposite. So normally we would start off with sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide, and that would make us oxygen and sugar. So we're doing just the opposite. We're starting with the sugar and the oxygen. That's why you guys need to breathe in order to be able to do cellular respiration. But we're going to be giving off carbon dioxide as a waste product, giving back some of that water that we took initially, and instead of sunlight, we're giving off energy in the form of those ATP molecules. And it's not the molecules themselves that are energetic, it is actually the bonds that connect the extra phosphate group to the ADP molecule that was there initially. So I'm going to skip this part first because we'll come back and talk about it in a moment. Doesn't matter what organism you are, all organisms start with the same part of respiration. They start with something called glycolysis, and this takes place not in the mitochondria, but outside the mitochondria in the cytoplasm. So it's not, going to be inside any organelles at all. This part does not require oxygen, so we call this the anaerobic phase. Right? So no oxygen required, and it takes place in all living things. Now, boy, does this look complicated here, but I'm trying to make it actually as easy as possible for you. So believe it or not, when I came up with these pictures, I looked for simple diagram of in this case of glycolysis. So this is a much simpler version that I could have come up with. The stuff at the top are the inputs, the stuff at the bottom are the outputs, and then you follow the white line, and that's telling you what happens to the glucose. So what happens in the process of glycolysis is that glucose is split. So glycolysis literally means you're lysing or splitting glucose. So this is a 6-carbon chain sugar, C6H12O6, and it splits into 2 3-carbon chain pyruvates, which each, has its own bonds and stuff like that. This requires energy. You need energy to split bonds, so 2 ATP are needed for glycolysis to start. And you also need to contribute 2 NADH molecules, 2 phosphates, and 4 ADP. And what leaves this is you get 2 ADP, 2 NADHs, and 1, 2, 3, 4 ATP. Now those phosphates they came in handy. So you have 4 ATP that are generated in glycolysis, but 2 of these guys got to go back to start the process over again. Okay, so really you're only generating a net of 2 ATP. So it produces a little bit of energy, but not a lot. And guess what? A little bit of energy is maybe all you need if you are a bacteria. But if you are a human being, you need a lot more energy than that. All right, so I'm going to go back here to a process called fermentation. So if there's no oxygen available, if you are, say, an anaerobic bacteria, or maybe you are a yeast, or maybe you're a human and you just can't get enough oxygen, what happens is your body does a process called fermentation to try to get energy really quick without using oxygen, okay? And it gets energy fast, but it doesn't give you very much energy. So what happens here is you get, you need the glucose and you need the ATP to start it off, and you get out ATP. So you're getting a net of 2 ATP. So essentially you make 4 AT, but then you get to keep 2 of them to use for energy, right? And you also produce a waste product, and that waste product is either lactic acid or alcohol and carbon dioxide. If you're a people, it's the lactic acid. If you're a yeast, it's the alcohol and carbon dioxide. People like to drink that kind of stuff. Tastes like beer. So here we have the process of fermentation. And as you can see, you get ATP being fed into the system, but then you have ATP being made by the system. So it kind of just is a repetitive cycle. It keeps driving the system. You can kind of keep using it, but it's not going to produce enough excess energy to support you long term, especially if you're a big body. Now, there's also a process in that if you produce too much lactic acid as a human being, that's actually bad for you because it can drive your levels of your blood acid up, and you can get what's called lactic acidosis, which is not good, kills you. But it does work well for short-term, I need energy really fast and I don't have enough oxygen or time conditions, such as I'm sprinting in a race, or that lion is going to get me, I better run, right? Then you need to have really quick source of energy. But guess what? Afterwards, when you're finally calmed down and everything, your muscles are going to ache. And that aching in your muscles is caused by the production of lactic acid. So that's the byproduct of anaerobic respiration, or that fermentation. So it's a good thing we don't have to rely on that for our main source of energy. What we do use for our main source of energy comes from inside the mitochondria, and this is aerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration uses oxygen. So there's 2 parts of aerobic respiration. First of all, remember, we all started off doing glycolysis. That's already been done, and that's done by everybody. Once glycolysis is done, we've got those 3 pyruvate molecules. And I am not going to go into a whole bunch of detail about this cycle here. But those 2 pyruvate molecules, they enter what's called the citric acid cycle. aka the Krebs cycle. So you're going to see both of those. And this happens within the matrix of the mitochondria. Basically, what's happening here is you're making a couple ATP, you're making some carbon dioxide, which is then released, breathing that stuff out, and you're also making an energy carrier molecule called NADPH, which is then being transferred to a different part of the mitochondria. Or NADH, excuse me. So here we have another view of the Krebs cycle. Here you've got your carbon dioxide leaving, your ATP, there should be 2 of them leaving with water. And you have the NADHs, 1 here, 3 over here. Those are going to the electron transport chain. Yes, you heard me correctly. There is another electron transport chain, one in photosynthesis, when we looked at the light reactions, and also one in respiration, aerobic respiration. So this is going to be a little trickier because my picture is going to get in the way, but the electron transport chain takes place in the membrane, inner membrane of the mitochondria. So if I go back to the slide, remember we have this membrane, this twisty turny membrane right here. This is where your electron transport chain will be taking place. So it's not like these guys have to go very far. So you can kind of keep an idea of that. And like any membrane, any bilipid membrane, you've got these cool little channels that are embedded within the membrane. These are proteins, basically, or a special kind of protein called an enzyme. The NADHs that just came from the Krebs cycle, they're going to donate their hydrogens, and those hydrogens are going to be shuttled through these hydrogen pumps, which what that does is it creates a hydrogen ion concentration gradient. You got lots of hydrogens over here, very few hydrogens over here. So these hydrogens are like, I want to get back inside because there's not a lot of hydrogens in there and it's really crowded over here. So what they do is they come through the only door they can, which is the ATP synthase complex. This is that enzyme. And in the process, they're losing energy and they're going to donate that to make ATP. And lots of ATP is made in the electron transport chain. In fact, up to 34 ATP, net ATP, can be made during the electron transport chain. So as a summary, we make 2 in glycolysis, that's everyone, 2 in the Krebs cycle or citric acid cycle, and the majority of that energy from that sugar comes from the electron transport chain, which is why when you hear about it, there are actually some diseases and some poisons and stuff. What they do is they interrupt this process, and that you won't have enough energy to survive if that happens. We will talk a little bit more about something that had that effect on a bunch of children. Okay? Hopefully that all made sense, and if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. I will talk to you guys all later.